first thing people noticed wasn't the quiet man sitting alone at the edge of the sunlit cafe. It was the way he held himself like someone who had already survived too much before breakfast. There was a stillness in him, the kind that didn't come from peace, but from exhaustion that had finally learned how to breathe. His daughter's tiny hand was wrapped around his finger, her laughter soft and bright against the hum of a late-morning crowd, as if she alone could still convince the world that something gentle remained. And then came the voice that cut through it all. She laughed. Not kindly, not playfully, but with the sharp edge of someone who had never been broken enough to understand what it meant to rebuild. Her words landed like a slap across the table, careless and loud enough for others to hear. She said a single dad like him could never please a woman, that men like him were half-finished stories, leftovers of failed lives, carrying baggage no one wanted to unpack. She said it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, surrounded by people who chuckled because it was easier than questioning cruelty. He didn't respond at first. He just looked at his daughter. And then he leaned forward, slowly, deliberately, like a storm that had finally decided to arrive. And he made a bet. Before we dive into what happened next, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to break, take a moment to comment, share, and subscribe to Heartfelt Stories. Because stories like this deserve to be felt, remembered, and passed on. His name was Cale Varon. There had been a time when his name meant something entirely different. A time when people stood a little straighter around him, when his presence filled rooms instead of slipping unnoticed through them. He had once been known for his brilliance, his ability to build something from nothing, to see solutions where others saw only walls. But life had a way of rewriting reputations, especially when tragedy arrived without warning and refused to leave quietly. Years ago, Cale had lost everything in a single merciless turn of fate. Not the kind of loss people whispered about for a few days before moving on, but the kind that hollowed out a man from the inside, leaving him standing but no longer whole. His partner had died suddenly, leaving behind not just grief but a newborn child in a world that seemed determined to remind him daily that he wasn't enough. There had been nights when the silence in his small apartment screamed louder than any crowd. Nights when his daughter, Solon, cried endlessly, and he sat on the floor with her, unsure whether he was comforting her or holding on to her just to keep himself from falling apart completely. He had learned everything the hard way, how to be both mother and father, how to survive on little sleep, how to carry grief without letting it crush the fragile life that depended on him. People hadn't been kind. They judged him for things they couldn't understand, for the way he dressed, for the tiredness in his eyes, for the fact that he didn't have time to charm anyone or pretend he was anything other than a man trying his best. They saw the cracks, but never the effort it took to keep them from widening. And yet, somehow he endured. Day by day, he rebuilt himself, not into the man he used to be, but into someone stronger in quieter ways. Someone who understood patience, who valued small victories, who found meaning in the simple act of showing up every single day for a child who saw him not as broken, but as everything. That morning at the cafe wasn't supposed to be anything extraordinary. It was just sunlight, coffee, and a rare moment of calm. Solon had insisted on sitting outside, fascinated by the way the light danced on the pavement. Cale had allowed himself, for once, to relax just a little, to believe that maybe life didn't always have to feel like a battle, until her voice shattered that illusion. The woman who mocked him was named Varel Cross. She was everything the world admired. Confident, successful, effortlessly put together. Her laughter carried across the space like a performance, designed to be noticed, to command attention. She was used to being right, used to being admired, and most of all, used to never being challenged. She didn't expect Cale to respond. Men like him, in her experience, didn't. They swallowed insults, avoided confrontation, shrank into themselves. They were easy to dismiss, easy to find. But Cale didn't shrink. When he leaned forward, there was something in his eyes that made her laughter falter for just a fraction of a second. Not anger, not bitterness. Something steadier, something far more dangerous. A quiet certainty. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't try to insult her back. He simply said that she was wrong. And then he made his bet. He said that people like her didn't understand what it meant to build a life from nothing, to love without conditions, to stand when everything in the world told you to fall. He said she judged strength by appearances, by charm, by surface-level perfection. But real strength, he told her, wasn't something you performed. It was something you lived through. He challenged her to spend a day seeing his world, not as an observer, not as someone looking in from a distance, but as someone who had to walk through it, feel it, carry it. If she still believed what she said after that, he would accept her judgment without another word. But if she didn't, if even a small part of her perspective changed, then she had to admit that she had been wrong, not just about him, but about people like him. The cafe had gone quiet by then, not completely silent, but quieter in a way people become when they sense something real unfolding in front of them. Varel hesitated. For the first time, her confidence wavered. But pride is a powerful force, and she wasn't someone who backed down easily. She accepted the bet, brushing it off with a dismissive smile, convinced that it would only prove her point further. What she didn't realize was that she had just stepped into a story she didn't understand. The day began simply enough. Solon took to Varel almost immediately, the way children often do with strangers who don't yet know how to hide their emotions. There was no judgment in her eyes, no preconceived notions, just curiosity and warmth. She reached for Varel's hand without hesitation, as if inviting her into a world where labels didn't matter. At first, Varel played along. She smiled, she laughed, she treated it like a game. But as the hours passed, something began to shift. She saw the way Kale moved through his day, not with ease, but with intention. Every action, every decision carried weight. There was no room for carelessness, no space for selfishness. His life wasn't structured around his own desires, but around what was best for his daughter. She noticed the small things, the way he always walked on the side closest to the street, the way he checked her temperature even when she seemed fine, the way he carried snacks, wipes, a small toy, prepared for anything, always thinking ahead. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't impressive in the way success usually was, but it was relentless, and it was real. They went to a park later that day, sunlight filtering through the trees, casting soft shadows across the grass. Solon ran ahead, her laughter echoing, and Kale watched with a quiet smile that held more emotion than any words could express. Varel found herself watching him, really watching him, and for the first time, she started to see beyond the surface. She saw the tiredness, yes, but also the strength it took to carry it. She saw the scars, but also the resilience that had formed around them. She saw a man who had every reason to give up, and yet chose, every single day, not to. The turning point came unexpectedly. Solon tripped. It wasn't a big fall, nothing serious, but she cried anyway, startled more than hurt. Kale was at her side instantly, his entire world narrowing down to that single moment. He held her, comforted her, spoke softly until her tears subsided. Varel stood there, frozen, because in that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. This wasn't weakness. This wasn't limitation. This was a different kind of strength, one that didn't need to prove itself, didn't need validation, didn't need applause. It simply existed, and it was more powerful than anything she had ever known. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, the day came to an end. They returned to the same cafe where it had all started. But everything felt different now. Varel sat across from Kale, quieter than before, her usual confidence replaced by something more thoughtful, more uncertain. She didn't laugh this time. She didn't mock. Instead, she admitted, slowly, honestly, that she had been wrong. Not just about him, but about everything she thought she understood. Kale didn't gloat. He didn't need to, because the real victory wasn't proving her wrong. It was showing her something she would never forget. Something real. Something human. As they parted ways, there was no dramatic conclusion, no sudden transformation, just a quiet understanding, a shift, and sometimes